Welcome back to the Overheard Podcast, recorded live in Banff. My name is Daniel Rudel, and with me is my co-host,
Matty Rage. Let's go.
very, very special guest sitting with us this afternoon. Cassidy Randall is an award-winning journalist, author, and adventurer whose work celebrates human resilience, wild places, and the women who define both. How's your day going today?
Amazing.
Congratulations on your awards.
Thank you. I'm still pretty floored about it.
No doubt.
So Cassidy is also the winner of the Nonfiction Award, as well as the Grand Prize for Mountain Literature here at the Banff Center Mountain Book and Film Festival. So big congrats.
Thank you.
Cassidy is the author of 30 Below, which won all these awards, the harrowing and heroic story of the first all-women's ascent of Denali, the extraordinary true account of a pioneering team of climbers who defied the odds and expectations to reach North America's highest peak. The book has been hailed by Vanity Fair, Time, Outside, and The Guardian. It was named one of the Washington Post's 10 most noteworthy books of the year. And just this week, of course, winning all the awards at the Banff Center Mountain Film and Book Festival. A recognition of Cassidy's remarkable storytelling and legacy of the women who climbed into history. Her writing has appeared also in Rolling Stone, National Geographic, Men's Journal, and Forbes, where she's also an adventure travel columnist. She's received the Lowell Thomas Gold Medal Award in Adventure Writing, and her work has been anthologized in this year's Best Sports Writing. When she's not writing, Cassidy can usually be found out exploring the mountains near her home in Montana or inspiring audience as a speaker on women's empowerment, adventure, and the wild spaces that shape us. Welcome to the show, Cassidy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm sort of embarrassed that my resume was such a mouthful.
No, it's great.
We've had worse mouthfuls for sure.
100%. But again, that's kind of on me. So, what is your thoughts, your feelings after being awarded the biggest prize of the festival?
Oh my gosh. I really am just totally floored. I really thought that the fiction book was going to win, which is about a village in Nepal and conflict with snow leopards and spirituality and magical realism. And that is right up Banff's alley. And so when they announced the grand prize and you have to come out and you have to give another acceptance speech, right? And I already, for some reason, was so nervous. It's like 2 minutes long. I don't even think I took up 2 minutes accepting the nonfiction award that I had nothing else to say.
Right.
And I just kind of stood there. I can't remember what I did say, but so I don't know that I looked the most articulate. People probably were thinking, this is the woman who won a big award.
Well, I think a little bit different when you're kind of put on the spot on the stage versus having time to prepare, right? Before we unpack 30 Below a little bit, later in our conversation here, can we go to what drew you first to the world of storytelling, adventure, and the outdoors?
That is a good question. I always loved to write when I was little. I think probably my first stories I wrote were multi-page handwritten in, like a third grader's hand fantasy books, because my dad read my sister and I The Hobbit as a bedtime story in installments when
my
we
dad
were
did
little.
the same, yeah.
Yes! So cool. And so that was what was in my brain. And I loved writing, gosh, I guess all through my teens. I was an English major. Well, actually, I was an American Lit major in college because I didn't want to take Milton and Chaucer. So I always loved reading and writing. And then I forgot about it. And I bled my heart out for a nonprofit association working at the intersection of women's health and the environment for years. Got really burned out, and I was a complete cliche. I quit my job. I had just enough money saved to go hike and tramp and hitchhike in New Zealand and ski for a year. And coming back from that, I realized, actually, this is even more cliche. It's so embarrassing, actually, that I remember I didn't want to keep all my friends and family updated just with texts and individual emails, and so I started a blog.
Oh yeah, the classic blog.
I mean,
what year would that have been?
I know. I think it was 2015.
Okay,
yeah, it was 10 years ago. Oh my gosh! But it reminded me that I love to write. So when I came back from New Zealand, it took me a while. It took me years before I could just only write for a living. I was consulting on the side, doing a lot of still bleeding my heart out for environmental work and public lands work. But for me, that intersection then of talking about adventure is the way that we experience the natural world, right? I'm not a nature writer. I actually don't even like traditional nature writing. Oh my God, if any nature writers are listening, I'm sorry. I totally read your books. And so for me, it just is a much more engaging way to talk about how we experience the natural world and really like that world's impact on us too, right?
Yeah.
Well, that was a part of your acceptance speech, right? It was that it's an adventure book, but it's not written as such.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I also am a nonfiction writer who doesn't like reading nonfiction. Because usually I think nonfiction books tend to be really dry and boring. And so I refused to write a book that was dry and boring.
Yeah.
And I mean, this story in this book, it would have been really hard to write a dry account of this entire journey that these women were on.
Fair enough. If you could go back, let's say, go back in time, if we could, build a time machine, what would be one piece of advice you'd give your younger self?
Ooh, about what?
Just about becoming a writer.
Oh.
Yeah.
It will be very hard to make money. There's going to be much more rejection than there is success. And you have to write only because you can't not write.
Fair. Well put.
Very well
Well
put.
put.
I think the love of the game is gotta be there, especially when you're talking projects. I mean, like a book. It's gonna take. How long did it take you to write?
Gosh, I think from proposal to turning in the manuscript it wasn't that long. It was probably 2 years. Once I had the contract in hand, I had already done so much research. This is what happens in nonfiction, little insider baseball, is that you have to do a lot of work on the proposal. So by
Yeah.
the time you have gotten a book accepted, I mean, you've almost written the book, to be honest.
You already know what it's about.
Yeah.
And the direction.
Yeah. And once I had then the research I needed in hand, the journals of these women that still survived and a lot of articles and books. I mean, synthesizing everything was a journey in itself, but I could see the story in my head. And so I could write it fairly quickly. I wrote the entire thing in probably 8 months, I think.
Wow.
Maybe less, while doing other things because again, I'm a writer and you don't make a lot of money and
Fair.
you have to, you're pretty full up.
We're kind of in the same boat.
Yeah.
We both have full-time jobs on top of this. But
Yes.
But we do it for the love of the
Exactly.
game. That's right.
That's
You
right.
got to. So when it comes to 30 Below, how much of your own experience has made its way into that work?
So I tried not to insert myself much at all because I wanted this story to speak for itself. There is one chapter, because I should back up. I didn't write this book for mountaineers. I didn't write it for a lot of the people who are actually at Banff, probably. I wrote it for what we like to call in our world the normies, right? And all
Yeah.
the people who maybe they just go for a hike once in a while. Maybe they never go for a hike, but they want to read about cool things, or you just like a good read. So people who knew nothing about mountaineering, basically.
Fair.
And so there is a chapter in there. And I almost kind of did this unconsciously, the way that I wrote it, and somebody else pointed it out to me, which was really interesting. But there is always the question coming from people who don't know the mountains. Why would people do this? Especially after what the main character, Grace, went through in trying to get up on Denali. I mean, she went through so much loss and grief and hard things. Almost losing her own life. Like, why would anyone do this, right? Yeah. And so the one chapter that I inserted myself in was that trying to explain to folks, why would we do this? Why do we live this kind of lifestyle? And that it was the only spot. And there's a part in there where I went from third person to like first person plural, which would be we. It was, these people do this and then we do this. And I didn't even know I'd done it until my editor pointed it out. And he said, it totally works, but did you do that on purpose? And I was like, no, I didn't even occur to me. But I think that's really important for if you want to get a story in front of a wide readership, like a forgotten story like this that should have a lot of impact, you would hope we should know this story, then you have to make it really accessible for people, right?
Yeah.
Well, that might be one of the secrets to its success.
Maybe. Well, let's
sure.
see if it will be successful.
Was there a specific moment or discovery that kind of sparked 30 Below and then made you realize that this story needed to be told?
Yes. So I was sitting in my home office one February snowy morning. I live in Montana. a few years ago now, it would have been, and this email from my agent popped into my inbox. And I love to open emails from my agent right away because I still am very excited anytime I get an email from my agent. And she wrote one line that said, "Is there a good story here?" And she put a link in there. And it was a link to an old national, well, it wasn't old at that point, it was 2 years old, National Park Service very short blog post commemorating the 50th anniversary of this climb, of this all-women's Denali Ascent. And at that point, I had been writing about adventure, and I'm pretty well steeped in the mountain world for years, and women's issues in adventure for years by then, and I had never heard of this climb. And I thought, if this was so significant, we should know about this the way we know Lynn Hill freed the nose in the 90s. Or now a lot of people may not have known who Lydia Brady was, but if you came to the fest, hopefully you got to hear from Lydia Brady.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we should know about this climb the way we know Lydia was the first woman to climb Everest without oxygen in the 80s. Why don't we know that? Yeah. And so what drew me into that, though, was thinking about this idea of when you think about mainstream adventure and exploration stories, like Endurance and Into Thin Air and The Wager being one of the newest, really popular ones, how many of those feature women?
Very common theme at this festival, and the talks as well. Very interesting topic that I thought was brought up is the idea of like women in climbing or in adventure sports being a little less boastful, or their ego being a little less involved, or maybe doing it a little bit less for the fame and more for personal motivations.
Yes.
Has been a huge topic this whole festival.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I think. Somebody asked me in my talk yesterday, so basically this climb disappeared from our collective consciousness. And part of that is because there was no national news on it. It made zero national news.
Fair enough.
And one of the men in the audience said, do you think that the women on the climb, that bothered them? Did they want that? Did they want the recognition? And of course, like, we all want recognition for our accomplishments, right? And I said, I think that maybe one of the climbers wanted that, but more that climber, Arlene Bloom, wanted just to prove that women could do this. And she wanted the world to know that. Right. But she didn't want the glory. She didn't want the fame. All these women, pretty much every single one of them, had been denied on some expedition or another because they were women. And what they wanted was to be able to just climb in mountains.
Right. Fair. I mean, we were at Joe's presentation for Women in Mountaineering. And yeah, it was kind of like the collective agreement that, I mean, some of them they just don't think about it until after the fact. It's like they're not doing it for the fame or the clout. And it's not until like way after the fact that they realize.
Yeah,
like,
maybe not realizing the significance of their feat,
right,
until afterwards. Whereas, I don't know, maybe it's a different focus with men, maybe doing it for that specific reason.
A little more pride-driven, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
When it comes to that story specifically, we're talking about a story, like you said, that was almost lost to history. What was the hardest part about bringing that story to life? Was it like gathering information or dealing with old journals?
For me, so when I write nonfiction, so I love narrative nonfiction. And for that, I need to be able to get inside the heads of the people I write about. And when you're writing historical, for me, the hardest part was that on 3 of these women, half of the team, virtually nothing exists anymore. And one of the women, her husband, she had just died, Dana Smith, and I didn't get to meet her. And her husband has dementia, and her daughter was estranged from her. And literally, there is nothing else hard copy except her journal that is still surviving, which is so interesting. So the lead up in the book is these fateful paths, how these women came together, which basically is like fiction. I mean, it's wild how these women came together.
Okay.
And what they had to go through, even in the 6 months before they made it to the mountain, it's insane. But there's not much on Dana. And then the rest of the book, where it's about the actual climb and what these women went through on the climb and this wild survival story, Dana ends up walking onto the page as one of the main characters because her journal was so comprehensive, which is so cool. I mean, most mountaineering journals in that era were so boring.
Yeah, pretty basic. Yeah.
Right? And all these women were on these like full journeys inside their heads that they put onto the page, and so I had access to that. But there are 2 women then who there's still that just not much about because they didn't keep journals. And Faye was just this mysterious mountain sage anyway, that I think was her enigmatic nature made men just fall in love with her. So I was trying to track down all this information on her when I was in New Zealand talking to Margaret Clark, who is one of 2 surviving members of this climb, and she's a Kiwi who is good friends with Faye. And we finally bring together all these 4 old climbing partners of Faye's and Margaret's. They were all men. And we were in this cafe chatting, and at one point or another in this conversation about Faye, every single man, all of them were married, were like, I was a little bit in love with her, which was so cool. So, I mean, in a way, it was challenging. The challenge was not being able to get in the heads of those 2 women, but at the same time, how fun to have some mystery.
No doubt.
Well, I mean, I feel like you still kind of forge a personal connection with them by pouring through their journals, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Which, can you imagine? I was talking to, so Grace Homan is the woman who led the climb, and she and her husband were famous mountaineers in Alaska. And all of their correspondence, her husband Vin was writing a full mountaineering book on Alaska before he died, and all of their correspondence, all their letters, all their notes, everything is in the University of Alaska in the special collections. And I was talking to Grace Homan's daughter, Mary Ann, because as I'm leafing through these letters of Grace's, I'm thinking she would have hated to know that people were going through her personal things. And I talked to Mary Ann, and Mary Ann's like, oh yeah. Like, can you imagine?
I would not. I don't think that
I
would be
know.
super,
Also, can you imagine what would people even leaf through today if we were trying to write our text messages that we don't keep?
Yeah.
or the notes that you have in your phone.
Yeah,
like
it would be so
Go
different.
through Samsung Notes and see what's up. It's like, it's grocery lists and whatnot instead.
How has diving into these women's stories particularly reshaped the way you think about courage and adventure in your own life?
That is a great question. What I have been thinking about a lot with these women is that they, in a time when women were not allowed to be complicated, 1970 is when we're talking here, and that was pre, Title IX, pre just a lot of things that gave women a lot more depth in our historical narratives and our cultural consciousness. These women were unapologetically complicated, and they were contradictory, and they made frustrating choices. Some of them were unlikable, and that doesn't mean that they're not also heroes. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I think often in adventure, we feel we have to play these roles, right? I mean, so I used to live in Revelstoke. I live back in Montana now. And Revelstoke is famous for being full of people who are so hardcore in the mountains, right? And some of them total under-the-radar ninjas. Nobody's really doing it for the fame, but people are just so hardcore. And I often felt if I wasn't playing that role of capable badass, right, of how far could I go, how fast could I go, how high could I go, I wouldn't fit in. And that people often in these worlds won't accept speaking about anything other than your skis and your mountain bikes and all those things, right? But for me, it just was this huge reminder of these women had the courage to be 3-dimensional and complicated and contradictory and scared and also incredibly competent. And that's okay.
Amazing. What do you hope readers take away from your book after reading it, men or women?
A lot of what we have talked about at this festival and some of what I talk about in my book talk and just some of the backdrop of the book in general is a gender lens, because that's what these women were up against at the time, right? Like they were trying to climb a mountain. And let's just back up to the context here that, I mean, this was the first all-women's ascent of any of the world's high peaks. We had sent men to the moon.
Yeah, good point.
And women hadn't stood on the highest points on Earth yet, which is insane. And so a lot of there's just a gender lens there. But I think there's this mythology in our culture that books about women, and particularly books about women that are written by a woman, are only for women.
Right.
And I got to be on a panel with Cheryl Strayed when I was at Mountain Film, who wrote Wild, right? And she was talking about this phenomenon and how, I mean, Wild was an international bestseller. Like, it was a rocket ship. And on the tour for it, she told one episode, and she said this was so indicative of the entire tour, where she went on a radio show, and before they were live on the air, the male radio host said, "You have written just an incredible book. I really needed to read it. It was so resonant with me." And he got on the air and said, "I'm here with Cheryl Strayed, who has written an incredible book for women."
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
And so what I want this book to be known for is not that it is a book about women for women. Not even that it's a book about women. Like, I don't want it to be known for that. I want the takeaway to be, this is a damn good adventure story, period.
Okay. How do you feel the landscape and kind of women in adventure or climbing has changed since then?
In so many ways, we have made so much progress, right? Nobody, well, I don't know how nobody, but we don't necessarily question that women can do these things. Although I would like to say that I was just talking to Lindsay Dyer, who is the best pro skier of her generation, probably.
Nice.
And when she was coming up in pro skiing in Jackson, she still, and this wasn't that long ago, like 15 years ago, still had people tell her that she could not huck a cliff because women's bodies couldn't handle it.
Wow.
I mean, absolute bullshit. Can I curse on your podcast?
Of
Oh,
course
yeah,
you
for
can.
Okay. And I mean, I still talk to pro skiers, pro avalanche forecasters, mountain guides, ski guides who are worried about having children and how that will affect their careers or have their contracts pulled. I wrote a story about Christina Lustenberger,
Right.
the greatest unsung explorer of our generation, I would say.
No doubt.
Who has notched more first descents than anybody I can and first descents than anyone I can think of. Still does not get the same contracts and skis as her male counterparts.
True.
So I think we have come a long way, but we are not there yet.
Well, I think what stands out to me as a positive note is, seeing these rooms filled, like you mentioned, stories for women by women, but filled with men as well. Like all the speaker talks have been very varied in the people that are sitting in those
Yes.
seats. So I think that needle is kind of going the other way. And
Yes.
that, especially with men, I mean, a good story is a good story no matter who wrote it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
When you think of your story, what parallels or challenges do you kind of see in your own life compared to the women in the book?
Ooh, okay.
Or
so,
like when it comes to writing?
Yes, I do have a story about this. And it's going to be me sort of on a little rant here. But so my next book, I have had to turn into historical fiction because the nonfiction proposal we couldn't sell. And it is on the first female polar explorer. And her story is full of trailblazing adventure, this epic romance, this devastating betrayal. Like, who doesn't want to read this story, right? And it's a true story. And the feedback we were getting from publishing houses was that people are sick of polar narratives, which of course they are because they're all about the same white men, that Josephine was not an explorer out on her own. She always went with her husband, and that's because that's what women had to do in the Victorian era to get any shit done. That her husband now wasn't famous enough to hang the marketing of such a book on. So apparently now we only get to write about women who are married to famous men. And that Josephine was racist. And so it would be hard for her to be a hero of our time, which apparently means that now we can't also write true historical narratives in which we learn lessons for now. So all of that has been so frustrating because then I have seen since those rejections, male colleagues get proposals green-lighted that are about Arctic explorers and polar explorers. So there is still something there that I very much identify with the women in 30 Below. And I do think the needles are shifting. Absolutely. Things are shifting, which is huge. I mean, even since I've been really writing full speed about this since 2018, things have shifted. But we still have a little ways to go.
Well, how do you navigate that as a writer versus kind of writing something to sell or writing something to write? Because that's got to be a very touchy,
Yes.
slippery slope. I would
It
say.
is.
Yeah.
It can be hard. And this is why I still would go tell my young self that you write because you can't not.
Yeah.
So the difference between nonfiction and fiction is that with nonfiction, you do some work up front for sure with the proposal, and then you are paid, you get an advance to write the book, right? And with fiction, usually you have to write the whole thing and then hope you can sell it.
Yeah.
And fiction often then is work of passion, right? And so that's the same with this. I cannot, since this story of Josephine hit me, I was going to tell you guys the insider baseball of how it hit me, but anyways, it struck me basically one night after doing a questionable substance. And I was sitting on my patio couch on the summer evening, and I'd written one story about Josephine in 30 Below, or one line, literally one sentence. And this just hit me as I'm lying on my patio couch in the summertime being like, there is more there. And she basically has been haunting me ever since, and I am writing her story because I can't not write it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's so good. When it comes to, this might be a little bit off topic here, but when it comes to like your process as a writer, are you writing on one topic specifically for like a long period of time, or are you writing a bunch of different things kind of simultaneously that all come together into projects later on?
Often I have several projects going on at the same time because it's hard to make money as a writer unless you're Stephen King, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, fair
He's
enough.
making a lot of money. And so I will often have like an essay going at the same time. I have a big investigative feature because I also do that sort of journalism. At the same time, I have a book going on. So, and at the same time, I'm doing consulting or writing coaching or whatever to make it all work, you know? So I have a lot of multitasking.
How does that like break down in your time management during the
Oh
day?
my
I'm just so
God.
curious as to like, what do you have like a schedule that I'm going to work on this at this time, or do you kind of let like, because I think when I'm trying to write for this show, I can't sit down and like have a time to do it. It's like the time hits me and I'm like, okay, this is the time I got to sit down and do it. It's like kind of when
Yes.
it's ready. How does that work for you?
I always like to think that I'll have a schedule and then I just blow it out of the water. But I do know, and I'm curious if this is the same with you, my most productive writing time is in the morning, like when the veil is still thin between
sure.
the dream world. Yes.
Yeah.
And so I definitely try to always reserve that time for myself. That's my novel writing time. And then anything that requires more like actual work, I'll kind of get into later in the day.
Amazing.
Fair enough.
I find myself the same. It's usually early morning. I like to wake up, get a coffee when the house is quiet and everything, and just you get in the zone almost, you know?
Yes. Flow state in writing. It's really cool.
It's a pretty magical place to
Yeah.
be for sure. This year's theme of the festival is fire and ice. When you think about the context of your book and your own work, what does that theme mean to you?
That's a good question. I hadn't actually thought about it. And you even sent me these questions last night, and I still haven't thought about it. I think I missed that question. But I mean, I would, the obvious, and since we were doing cliche things earlier, I think about fire in terms of this story, it's drive and passion and determination and audacious thinking. And the ice is everything hard that you have to carve your way through, probably, to get there, right? And I do think that we probably all have that in our own lives. We all have our own fire and ice, if you think about it that way.
Absolutely. I think the huge challenge faced by the women in your book can kind of be felt by every person, you know what I mean, who's going through whatever obstacles it might be in their life, and know that, you know, people have been fighting that fight for a long time.
Yes.
Right? Like, well, festivals like this one, like the Banff Mountain Book and Film Festival, they bring together like explorers, filmmakers, writers, and scientists. How does it feel to be part of that creative ecosystem, and what do you take away from it?
It is amazing. So I got to go to Mountain Film, which is in Telluride, and it's the other big sort of fest.
Cool.
And it felt so different. I'd never been. I've been coming to Banff since I lived in Revelstoke. And Mountain Film is, it's amazing. But it's more dispersed. It's not as centralized. And there's something about having like the Mac Lab here on campus, about just having people in the same hallways, about the Max Bell where all the book events take place, where I don't know what it is, but creativity just crawls out of the walls here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I've never felt that anywhere else. I think it's really special.
I've felt this similar thing, and this is going to be very strange to say, but when I first quit alcohol, I was going to AA meetings, and having a group of people in a place focused kind of on the same things, or that have that same goal in mind, it's a very powerful thing. And it kind of, there's an energy, there's a feeling to it, which is definitely alive and well here at the Banff Center Mountain Film and
Yeah,
Book
you
Festival.
can't escape it here. Like, and especially with this being like the big weekend, like the Super Bowl weekend, as you said earlier.
it's
Like even the building that we're in now, the Kinnear Center, it's been pretty mellow for most of the week. The marketplace wasn't open last weekend, and this morning it's just hustling and bustling in here, and the energy's going. It's just wild up here. How I don't know. It's just that collective like creativity is just kind of all intertwined.
Like you said, it's oozing out of the walls.
I love it. Wait, can you tell me the Super Bowl analogy? Because I love it.
just like this weekend is kind of the Super Bowl of the festival. Everything's kind of coming together. Even coming up to Banff Center early this morning, like you had people walking up the Ken Madsen path and up, like 7:30, 8 in the morning. There's people kind of scoping out their spots and getting ready. The parking's already full. So it's, it definitely this weekend feels like it's been kicked up a notch a little bit.
Can I also extend the analogy that I think that this is the Super Bowl of the year for most creatives anyway?
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, for sure.
Have you had any standout encounters or conversations with maybe any of your heroes here at the film festival?
Oh, so many. Well, Buddy Levy is another best-selling author, and we also have the same agent, and
very cool.
we got to sign books together, which was awesome. But I mean, in general, just running into people. That's what I love about Banff, is you just run into people. So my very first outside story that I wrote, I don't even know when that was, 2016 maybe, was about a photographer who was changing the way that we view climbers. Right. And as I was going to check in, I was like, Irene Yee? So I just ran into Irene, the first thing. I haven't seen her for years, and I love that. But I got to talk to Lydia Brady, and Lydia I knew when I lived in New Zealand, sort of vaguely, but just talking to Lydia is amazing. Like, you just get to rub elbows with people who are not just incredible filmmakers or authors, but people who are doing just incredible things.
One thing that stands out to me is the approachableness of these people too. Like,
fair enough.
You would think a bit of a, maybe not an attitude, it's probably the wrong word to say, but like
it's just an openness to kind of hang out and shoot the shit. Like, we did our little short interview with Haley there at the Max Bell building.
Yeah.
We're like, what's your background? Like, are you an athlete? Oh, I'm a previous Olympic athlete. We're like, what? You're just gonna like hang out and talk to us for 5 minutes? Like, cool, man. Like, it's just so wild. It's like, that's just the attitude up here. Is like, yeah, man, I'll shoot shit. Let's go.
So awesome. So Cassidy, what's next for you? Any projects that you're working on that you could share with us?
Well, I'm working on that novel, and I have a few stories that are in the works and coming out. One is, most of your listenership is probably Canadian, but I'm working on a big story about how the Trump administration has been attacking our public lands sort of unprecedentedly. And that is hitting rural conservative communities the hardest, who are his base. So that is coming out. And then mostly I really just want to focus on writing this book. But I also get to have my first big teaching gig back at University of Montana, where I got my master's in the program where I got my master's, to be the Kittredge Distinguished Visiting Writer. And so I get to teach a new generation of voices, which I'm very excited about.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
What a year. Yeah.
I know. I'm going to have to reset my adrenal system for next year.
Knock them out of the park on the baseball analogies. Lastly, if the women from the story of Denali could be sitting here today, what do you think they would say about the world they helped shape?
What's been interesting to me are the two women who are still surviving from this climb, Margaret Clark and Arlene Bloom. Mm-hmm. Both of them say they don't think they did something all that amazing, which blows my mind,
Pretty
honestly.
wild take.
Yeah.
No doubt.
But I do think that in looking at where we are now, with so much more parity and so much more equality, and the fact that nobody's going to question if, a woman wants to get to some big summit. I mean, how many women have stood on top of the high peaks now, right? Like, how many women have done just insane things in the mountains? Hillary Nelson, Lucy, like Chantal Astorga, just incredible. I hope that they would be proud. And I hope that they would realize that they are the ones who open that door, right? And I think maybe it's hard sometimes for people to realize the impact that you've had, and you don't want to take that credit, and you don't want to have that kind of spotlight on you, or think that you are even capable of doing something that big. But I hope that they would be really proud.
I think they would be, definitely. And proud of you as well for your contribution and taking that story and getting it out to the public in a digestible format. It's very inspiring.
Thank you.
We want to thank everyone for taking the time to tune in today and check in with us. I want to thank you, Cassidy, for lending your voice and sharing your insights with us. Congratulations again on your awards.
Thank you.
If it's your first time listening, please don't forget to give us a like and subscribe. We got to give a big thanks to Drink Shaft, our original sponsor, and a big thanks to Banff Center Mountain Film and Book Festival for having us and getting these amazing people in our seats this week. Any closing thoughts?
You guys, that was one of the most fun conversations I've had since releasing the book in terms of interviews. You guys are good.
Thank you so much.
We try.
That's it. Well, that's all we have for you today. We're going to be back with a few short interviews this afternoon and a few full lengths tomorrow. So, like I said, give us a like and subscribe, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday.